For centuries, Earth had stayed silent, while other civilizations expanded across the stars, making their mark on the galaxy. Humanity kept to itself. They didn't reach out, they didn't fight wars with other species, and they didn't get involved in the Galactic Council's politics. Earth was just a quiet, small dot in the vast universe. But then, everything changed in the blink of an eye dot. It all began with a message. The message came on a quiet day when no one expected anything. It was simple, only a few words, but those words sent a shockwave through the galaxy. It wasn't a message of peace or diplomacy. It wasn't a plea for help or a request for trade. The message was chilling. We are coming. The galaxy froze. For the first time in a long while, all the powerful civilizations looked at each other, confused. Who was it from? Why now? What did it mean? Most importantly, how should they respond? At first, no one knew what to think. The Galactic Council, a group made up of the most powerful species in the galaxy, brushed it off. It must be a mistake, they thought. Perhaps it's just a malfunction in communication or a minor threat we can easily dismiss. They were wrong. The council met to discuss the message. Their leader, a wise and ancient alien from a distant star system, scoffed at the idea. He laughed, his voice echoing through the hall as he said, "Humans? They've been silent for too long. This is nothing more than a bluff, a desperate cry for attention. We have nothing to fear." He was confident, almost arrogantly so. But as the council members debated, something strange happened. The silence from Earth continued. There were no follow-up messages, no threats, no signs of anger or fear, just the quiet. The longer the silence lasted, the more uneasy the galaxy grew. Humans were known for their unpredictability, but this was different. Something about the message felt wrong. And as the days passed with no further contact, a deep worry started to settle in the hearts of the galaxy's leaders. They couldn't shake the feeling that something more sinister was at play. On Earth, a different story was unfolding. The message that was sent was not a random warning, but the beginning of a much larger plan. Humanity had been quietly observing the galaxy for years. They watched as other species fought for power, formed alliances, and expanded their empires. And while the galaxy had been busy with its own struggles, Earth had been silently preparing. What the galaxy didn't know was that humanity had been developing weapons, technology, and warships far beyond anything any other species had ever dreamed of. The humans had been quiet for a reason. They didn't want anyone to know what they were truly capable of. But now they were ready to reveal the truth. It wasn't until days later that the first hint of Earth's power came to light. Ships, massive and dark, began to appear in the galaxy's most distant sectors. These were no ordinary ships. The ships that emerged from Earth's space stations were sleek, intimidating, and unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were designed for war, designed to dominate. The first warship to be revealed was called the Iron Fist. It emerged from a hidden hangar on Earth's moon, silently and without warning. It was equipped with weapons so powerful that even the largest fleets in the galaxy would stand no chance. As it powered up, the human warship was already making its way toward the galactic center, where the Council's headquarters were located. When news of the Iron Fist reached the Galactic Council, panic spread quickly. At first, they thought it was an isolated ship, a rogue weapon perhaps. But then, more ships appeared, and these ships weren't alone. Each one was equipped with advanced shields, faster than light travel, and weaponry that could obliterate entire fleets in seconds. They were no longer a silent species. They were a species ready for war. The galaxy that had once dismissed humanity now had no idea how to respond. The Iron Fist was followed by dozens of other ships, all equally as powerful. Soon, the Galactic Council realized that Earth had been preparing for something far greater than they could ever imagine. Humans weren't just coming. They were coming with a force so terrifying that no one in the galaxy could stand against them. In that moment, The galaxy had only one thought. What had they done? How could they have ignored humanity for so long? And now, with these ships appearing from nowhere, they had no way to stop them. Earth had remained silent, but they had watched, they had learned, and now they were ready to unleash a power no one could stop. As the ships moved closer to the center of the galaxy, a deep fear began to spread. The galaxy's most powerful fleets, once so confident in their strength, were now questioning their own survival. They were left with a single terrifying thought. If humans were coming, what kind of destruction would they bring? The galaxy was left without answers. And soon, the terror that humanity had been quietly preparing to unleash would become a reality. The Iron Fist was only the beginning. While the galaxy remained paralyzed by fear, humanity's warships continued to pour into the vastness of space. Unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, these ships weren't just advanced, they were designed to inspire terror. And their arrival was like the darkness before a storm. As the first wave of ships emerged from Earth's secret space yards, they made no attempt to communicate. There were no grand speeches, no demands for surrender. Humanity wasn't interested in words. They had no time for negotiations or diplomacy. Instead, they sent their ships to the edges of the galaxy, where they could be seen by everyone, sleek, black, and armored like nothing the universe had ever encountered. Their weaponry was unlike anything the galaxy's top scientists had ever dreamed of. The energy cannons alone could vaporize an entire city with a single shot, and their shields were impenetrable by any alien technology. Captain Noah Grant, the commander of the Iron Fist, stood aboard his warship, watching the vastness of space through the massive windows. His face was stern, his thoughts steady. He was prepared. They all were. Humanity had been waiting for this moment, not with impatience, but with quiet certainty. The galaxy had left them alone for far too long. Now they would reclaim what had once been theirs. The first strike came without warning. Humanity's ships activated their superweapons, sending shockwaves of power across the galaxy. On a distant alien world, the first victim of humanity's fury was a massive, heavily fortified space station. It had once been a symbol of the alien empire's might. But now, it was nothing more than a speck of dust, disintegrated by a single blast from a human warship's main cannon. The station's debris scattered through space like shattered glass, and not a single piece of the station remained intact. The message was sent loud and clear across the stars. Humanity is back, and they are not afraid to use their strength. Elsewhere, fleets of alien warships began to gather, their leaders scrambling to make sense of the chaos. But it was already too late. Humanity's ships were too fast, too powerful, and too numerous. The galaxy's most advanced warships, once considered the pinnacle of warfare, stood no chance. Captain Noah Grant stood on the command deck of the Iron Fist, watching as their enemies attempted to regroup. His fingers tapped rhythmically on the console in front of him, as if counting down the inevitable. The humans had been silent for so long, but now, they were unleashing the fury of a species that had been underestimated for far too long. It wasn't just about power anymore. It was about revenge. Humanity had been abandoned by the galaxy, overlooked, dismissed. Now they were proving their worth. But there was more at stake than pride. This was survival. Across the galaxy, other alien species were beginning to realize the magnitude of the threat. The first few engagements had been chaotic, with fleets of ships falling before the might of humanity's weapons. It wasn't just about destroying enemies, it was about establishing dominance. Humanity wasn't just fighting for victory, they were fighting for their place in the galaxy, and they would take it by force. On the bridge of the Victory's edge, an alien admiral watched helplessly as one of his largest battlecruisers was torn apart by a human ship's relentless barrage. The explosion rocked his vessel, and he couldn't hide the terror in his eyes. The human warships had a simple but terrifying way of fighting. They didn't retreat, they didn't show mercy, and they didn't need to negotiate. They fought until there was nothing left to fight for. It was not long before the galaxy's most feared warships were in full retreat, their commanders unsure of how to proceed. The warships that had once instilled fear in the hearts of lesser civilizations were now helpless before humanity's might. There were no alliances that could save them, no treaties that could hold the humans back. The humans were unstoppable. In the command rooms of the galaxy's council, the room was filled with chaos. The once calm and collected leaders who had dismissed humanity's threat now found themselves on the defensive. The galaxy had underestimated Earth, and now it was paying the price. The human warships continued their relentless march, tearing through fleet after fleet. But there was no gloating, no celebration. The humans were a focused, organized force, pushing forward, ever unyielding. Earth's military might, once hidden away in the shadows of silence, was now in full display, and there was no turning back. As each alien fleet fell one by one, the question that had begun to haunt the galaxy became more pressing. Why had humanity been so silent for so long? And more importantly, what were they going to do next? The answer came in the form of another fleet of human warships emerging from the depths of space. This time, it wasn't just about power. This time, humanity was coming for something far more important: respect. And they were determined to take it, no matter the cost. The galaxy's most powerful warlords, once confident in their invulnerability, now found themselves in the midst of a nightmare they had never imagined. Humanity had struck with brutal force, and the shockwaves were still rippling through the farthest corners of the universe. The galaxy had never seen anything like it, and the humans hadn't even begun to show their full strength, while the galaxy's council scrambled to make sense of the destruction. Captain Noah Grant stood aboard his flagship, the Iron Fist, watching the chaos unfold on his ship's massive display. His hands were steady on the controls, but his mind was focused on the next phase. He knew what had to be done, what most of the galaxy didn't understand was that humanity wasn't just making a statement, they were waging a war for survival. Long before this moment, Earth had been the subject of scorn, abandoned by the greater civilizations of the galaxy. They had been the ones left out of negotiations, excluded from alliances, and ignored by those who saw themselves as the galaxy's true rulers. Now humanity was claiming its place at the top, and nothing would stop them. Grant's voice rang out, calm and cold. "Prepare for Phase 2, he ordered, and a deep rumble shook the Iron Fist as its engines powered up. Behind him, the dark vastness of space stretched out, but it wasn't empty anymore. Humanity was everywhere. The Iron Fist wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol and humanity's most powerful weapon. Its destructive power was beyond comprehension. But this time, they weren't simply annihilating fleets or destroying star systems. This time, they were sending a message: we will not be ignored. And it wasn't just one ship. Fleet after fleet emerged from the darkness, each as intimidating as the last. They weren't the old, clunky warships that the galaxy had seen before. These were sleek, sharp-edged designs, each with the power to turn a star into a supernova. Human technology was far beyond anything the galaxy had prepared for, and it was beginning to sink in. The universe wasn't just witnessing a war, it was witnessing the birth of a new order. Meanwhile, in the Grand Council chamber, leaders from every corner of the galaxy argued in frantic panic. Their voices grew louder, accusations flying, but no plan came together. They had underestimated humanity's strength, and now they had no way to stop them. On the other side of the galaxy, in a heavily fortified alien stronghold, Commander Lysara stood before her war council, eyes burning with frustration. She had always believed that the strength of her species would protect them from anything, but now she wasn't so sure. "The humans are unstoppable," she murmured, her voice cold with the realization of their power. "We underestimated them. We thought they were primitive, weak, but we were wrong. Now we are paying the price for our arrogance. But Lysara wasn't one to give up easily. Despite the galaxy's overwhelming sense of dread, she had one last move to make. If humanity wanted war, she would give it to them. She knew of a weapon, a secret weapon, buried deep in the heart of her people's most ancient planet. It was a last-ditch effort, a desperate plan to turn the tide of the battle. But would it be enough? And could it ever be powerful enough to match humanity's terror? Across the stars, whispers grew louder. The once proud civilizations of the galaxy, who had long held sway over the universe, now found themselves united by one common fear, humanity. But Captain Grant's forces were already moving faster than anyone could track. Humanity's ships weren't just advancing, they were already in position. The terror that followed them had a name, the Silent Fleet. These ships didn't make a sound when they moved, but their mere presence was enough to send shockwaves through the hearts of those who saw them. The galaxy's defenses were weak and scattered. Humanity's strategy was simple, but devastating. Strike fast, strike hard, and leave nothing behind. As the Iron Fist continued its path through the galaxy, fleets of ships followed in its wake, cutting down anything in their path. Planets, stations, even entire star systems, nothing was safe. Humanity was showing no mercy. And as if on cue, the Silent Fleet moved again, this time into enemy-controlled space. Within moments, enemy fleets began disappearing, leaving nothing but the debris of ships too broken to even register on scanners. A single human warship had wiped out an entire fleet, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. For the first time in the galaxy's history, the terrifying truth was clear. Humanity had arrived, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop them. The universe wasn't just witnessing a new power, it was witnessing a new reality. Across the galaxy, panic spread like wildfire, faster than anyone had ever anticipated. The galaxy's greatest minds had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. Their once unchallenged power was crumbling before the might of Earth's warships. But what shook the galaxy more than anything was not the destruction, it was the silence that came with it. Humanity wasn't just fighting, they were erasing entire civilizations with a calm, cold precision. No words, no warning, just the crushing blow of power. On Earth, the high command of the human forces watched the unfolding chaos on their massive display screens. Captain Noah Grant leaned against the railing, his eyes scanning the reports pouring in from every corner of the galaxy. His fingers tapped in thought, calculating the next move. The galaxy had no idea what to expect. But he did. "This is just the beginning," he murmured to his crew. "We've only shown them a fraction of what we can do." In the command rooms of the galaxy's leaders, the tension was palpable. Their pride was shattered, their military forces reduced to ashes. But there was still hope, they believed. They were fighting an enemy they knew little about, but they had powerful allies of their own. Allies who would not sit idle while humanity claimed dominance. And in a last-ditch effort, they turned to a weapon long thought to be a myth, Lysara. The alien commander who had once thought humanity weak, now found herself at the center of a plan that could tip the balance. Her people had spoken of an ancient artifact, a weapon that, if used correctly, could match the destruction wrought by humanity. It was buried deep within the sacred halls of her home planet, hidden for generations, its power too great to be wielded lightly. But this was no longer about diplomacy or strategy. This was about survival. What choice do we have? Lysara asked her council, her voice filled with determination. If we do nothing, the humans will erase us. We can't allow that. We must awaken the Titan, and we must do it now. The Titan was a living weapon, an ancient construct from a long-lost civilization, buried deep beneath the surface of Lysara's planet. When it was awakened, its destructive power could obliterate an entire fleet with a single strike, but it came at a price. The weapon was unstable, uncontrollable, and could just as easily destroy its masters as its enemies. It was a gamble. But in their desperation, the galaxy's leaders had no other option. Meanwhile, Captain Grant's focus remained unbroken. His orders were simple, his strategy clear. Humanity was not fighting for survival. It was fighting to take the place that was rightfully theirs. The galaxy's complacency had left Earth in the shadows for too long, and now they would learn just how much power humanity had amassed. The Iron Fist moved ahead, its engines humming with an energy that had once been feared by the entire galaxy. Grant knew that humanity's victory wasn't just about firepower. It was about taking control, about bending the universe to their will. And that, more than anything, was what would make humanity feared across the stars. On the alien planet, the Titan was being activated. Its core hummed to life, slowly at first, then with growing intensity. The ancient construct rose from the depths of the planet, shaking the ground with every step. The weapon, designed to rival the power of an entire fleet, was now awake. News reached Grant's ears just as the Titan began its march. He watched, unfazed, as his warships readied themselves for the inevitable clash. The galaxy had made its move, but humanity had already anticipated it. "Let them come," Grant said coldly, his voice steady. "They're about to learn what happens when they awaken something they can't control." The battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy had only just begun. The galaxy's forces, led by the Titan, would meet humanity's might head-on. But the humans weren't worried. They had learned long ago that power was not just about the strength of weapons. It was about knowing when to strike, where to strike, and how to destroy with precision. As the Titan lumbered forward, ready to unleash its catastrophic fury, humanity's warships silently positioned themselves, waiting for the right moment to strike. The silence of space was broken only by the hum of engines and the steady rhythm of Captain Grant's thoughts. In that moment, he knew something that the galaxy still hadn't learned. Humanity wasn't just a force to be reckoned with, it was the new order, and they weren't about to back down. The Titan was supposed to be the galaxy's ultimate weapon, an unstoppable force that would level humanity's warships in seconds. But as it stomped across the battlefield, its ancient power surging through the depths of the galaxy's leaders began to realize something that terrified them more than anything else. Humanity had prepared for this moment. In the silence of space, humanity's warships moved with terrifying precision, each one a perfect extension of its captain's will. They didn't need to overpower their enemies with sheer force. They just needed to outthink them, to predict their every move. It was a cold, calculated approach, and it was working perfectly. Captain Noah Grant stood at the heart of the Iron Fist, watching the Titan advance. Despite its immense size and power, humanity's forces were unfazed. The Titan might have been a weapon of unimaginable strength, but it wasn't enough to win the war. Humanity's strength wasn't in their weapons alone. It was in their strategy, their adaptability, and their sheer will to survive. "Prepare for Phase 3, Grant said, his voice cold and focused. "It's time to end this." As the Titan loomed closer, the galaxy's forces began to falter. Their once unshakable belief that they could defeat humanity's warships crumbled. They had relied too much on ancient technology, on the idea that their age-old weapons would always be enough. But humanity's power was different. It wasn't about ancient strength or overwhelming firepower. It was about using what you had, and using it better. And now, the Iron Fist and its fleet were ready for their final assault. Across the stars, the remnants of the galaxy's defenses were shattering. The fleets that had once been proud and strong were falling apart under the might of humanity's ships. The Titan, which was meant to be the galaxy's salvation, now found itself surrounded on all sides. Every attempt to unleash its devastating power was thwarted by the human's superior tactics and unmatched firepower. As the Titan fired its first shots, massive energy blasts that could destroy entire planets, the human fleet didn't flinch. They danced around the blasts with ease, their warships moving as one fluid unit, slipping past the ancient weapon's defenses like shadows. Every attack made by the Titan only served to bring humanity closer to victory. It was a game of cat and mouse. But the humans were the ones in control. Lysara, who had once believed that the Titan would be the end of humanity, now found herself staring in horror at the destruction unfolding before her eyes. The Titan had begun to falter, its power beginning to drain, its systems overloaded by the constant barrage from humanity's fleet. The weapon, so mighty in legend, was slowly being rendered useless. The galaxy's last hope was slipping away. "Why isn't it working?" Lysara muttered to herself, watching as the Titan struggled to keep up with the humans' onslaught. She had been sure that the Titan would turn the tide, that it would strike down humanity's warships with a single blast. But humanity's ships were too fast, too precise. The more the Titan attacked, the more its own energy systems burned out. It wasn't long before the once unstoppable weapon became nothing more than a hulking mass of wasted power. Captain Grant's voice echoed over the comms, calm and commanding. "We're finishing this, no more delays." In that moment, the Iron Fist and its fleet launched a coordinated strike, their weapons firing in perfect synchronization. The Titan tried to retaliate, but it was too late. The barrage from humanity's ships tore into its hull, cracking its core. Energy lines exploded, and the massive weapon let out a final, deafening scream before it crumbled to dust. With the Titan destroyed, humanity's victory seemed inevitable. The galaxy's once great civilizations, the same ones that had laughed and dismissed humanity as nothing more than a fledgling species, were now on the brink of collapse. The reality had set in. Humanity was not a force to be ignored, not a species to be underestimated. As the galaxy's leaders tried to regroup, they realized that the humans weren't simply taking over, they were shaping the galaxy into something entirely new. The message was clear. Those who bent the knee to humanity would be spared. Those who resisted would be wiped out. The galaxy had never seen a force like this before, and it was too late to stop it. For Captain Noah Grant, the war was far from over, but the message was already sent. Humanity had reclaimed its place in the stars, and nothing, no weapon, and no empire could ever take that away. The fall of the Titan sent ripples of fear and disbelief across the galaxy. What had been the last hope for the galaxy's civilizations was now nothing but a memory, a shattered husk floating in the void. Humanity's warships, relentless and unwavering, continued their march through space. The sound of their engines was the only thing left echoing across the vast emptiness. Victory seemed inevitable, but in the shadows a new, unexpected force was rising, while the galaxy's ruling powers continued to reel from their crushing defeats. Hidden factions began to stir. Ancient alien groups who had been waiting for the galaxy's downfall saw an opportunity. Humanity's unchecked rise to power was a threat not just to the galaxy's established order, it was a challenge to the very balance of the universe itself. And they would not stand by and let it happen. Among these groups was the mysterious Neroth, a collective of beings who had existed for millennia in the dark corners of space. They had watched humanity's rise with both fear and fascination. They had the technology, the knowledge, and the power to challenge humanity. They weren't about to let a young species overthrow the cosmic order that had existed for eons. Prepare the fleet, the leader of the Neroth, an ancient being named Zarek, ordered with calm determination. Humanity has shown its power, but they have underestimated us. We are the true force of the galaxy, and we will remind them of that. Zarek's words were like a spark in a dry forest, igniting the hidden forces across the galaxy. The Neroth were unlike any species humanity had encountered. They had mastered the art of cloaking, stealth, and deception, making their ships nearly invisible to all but the most advanced sensors. Now they were ready to strike, while the humans celebrated their victories, preparing for what seemed like the final push, they were unaware of the shadow gathering at their borders. The Neroth were watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when they did, it would be swift, deadly, and brutal. Back aboard the Iron Fist, Captain Noah Grant paced the bridge, studying the latest reports. The human fleet had been unstoppable, crushing alien forces in every system they passed through. But something felt different now. There was a strange tension in the air, a whispering sense that something was on the horizon. He couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's victory wasn't as certain as he had thought. "Get me a full status report," Grant ordered, his voice sharp. The crew scrambled to pull up data on enemy movements, but there was nothing to report. Everything seemed quiet. Too quiet. Grant's instincts told him that they were walking into a trap. His thoughts turned to Earth, to the family and comrades he had left behind. He had promised them that humanity would rise, but now that promise felt like a weight. As the captain of the Iron Fist, he had carried the hopes of his people into the galaxy. He couldn't afford to falter now, but just as his fears began to grow, the first sign of the Neroth appeared. In an instant, humanity's fleet was plunged into chaos. The first Neroth ship, a massive black vessel that seemed to absorb the stars around it, dropped out of its cloak right in the middle of the human fleet. The blast of energy it unleashed tore through two human warships like paper, reducing them to fragments before they could even react. "We have contact. Enemy ships incoming," the tactical officer shouted, panic in his voice. Grant's eyes narrowed. He had known this moment would come. He had known that the galaxy's leaders couldn't stay silent forever. But he wasn't ready for the power of the Neroth. Their ships moved like shadows, striking fast and without warning, taking out entire sections of the human fleet with surgical precision. Each blast seemed to come from nowhere, leaving the humans scrambling for a response. The Iron Fist fired back with everything it had. But the Neroth ships were far faster, far more maneuverable. They darted in and out of human sensors, like ghosts. In the night, and with every strike, humanity's once formidable fleet was whittled down. Grant's voice rang out with authority. "Order all ships to fall back. We're not fighting them here." But as humanity retreated to regroup, it became clear the Neroth were playing a different game. They weren't here to fight for territory. They were here to test humanity's resolve, to see how far they could push them before they cracked. And as the Neroth fleet faded into the shadows, humanity was left with a chilling realization. They weren't the only predators in this galaxy anymore. For the first time, Captain Grant felt the weight of humanity's struggle. They had won battles. They had taken worlds. But now they were facing an enemy unlike any they had ever seen before. An enemy that could move without being seen, strike without warning, and disappear before they could be fought. The war wasn't over, and humanity's greatest test was yet to come. The war had been humanity's to win, but as the Neroth continued their relentless assault, the galaxy's balance shifted in ways no one could have predicted. Captain Noah Grant stood on the bridge of the Iron Fist, his eyes scanning the empty blackness of space. The once absolute certainty of victory now seemed uncertain. Lost in the swirling shadows of the Neroth fleet, the humans had fought tooth and nail to carve their place in the stars, tearing through alien empires with cold efficiency, showing the galaxy their power. But the Neroth had shattered that illusion of invincibility with one simple, chilling truth. Humans weren't the only ones who could rule the galaxy with an iron fist. Grant's thoughts were interrupted by a series of rapid beeps from the comm station. The tactical officer's voice crackled through the speakers. "Captain, we've detected a new fleet, approaching from the sector just beyond the nebula." Grant straightened. His heart skipped a beat. They had already taken the fight to Neroth territory, but this was different. The Neroth had not only proved their power, they had proven their cunning. They moved like shadows, their warships barely visible until they were upon their target. Humanity's forces had been battered, regrouping after a series of surprise strikes, and now, There was something more on the horizon. "Lock all weapons and prepare for evasive maneuvers," Grant commanded. He didn't need to say more. His crew had been trained for moments like this. The Iron Fist was humanity's most formidable warship, but the Neroth were unlike anything they had ever encountered. They didn't just fight to conquer, they fought to break their enemies, to instill fear and despair. As the Iron Fist and its fleet braced for another wave, the quiet of space was shattered by the terrifying sight of thousands of Neroth ships. Decloaking, their hulls a shimmering black, blending seamlessly with the darkness of the cosmos. For the first time, humanity saw the full extent of the Neroth power, not just their ships, but their ancient, terrifying fleet tactics. It wasn't just their stealth that made them dangerous. It was their ability to strike with devastating precision, to read their enemies like a book. "We're outnumbered," the tactical officer said, his voice trembling with the reality of the situation. "But they're still out there, somewhere." The Neroth didn't need to send fleets in waves. They had mastered the art of psychological warfare, playing with their enemies' minds as much as with their ships. They would disappear in the darkness, reappear in unexpected places, striking where the enemy least expected. Humanity's once unstoppable force had now become a target, vulnerable in ways they hadn't imagined. It was clear now the Neroth were not just fighting for victory, they were fighting to erase humanity's claim to the stars altogether. On the Iron Fist, Grant's mind raced. He had seen the worst that the galaxy had to offer: alien empires, fleets of unimaginable size, and weapons of mass destruction. But this was different. The Neroth didn't just want to defeat humanity, they wanted to erase them from existence. They wanted to prove that the galaxy could never belong to a species as young and unpredictable as humans. "We need to break their tactics," Grant muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. The Neroth were invisible, unpredictable, and cruel in their attack methods. But even the greatest shadows had weak points. There was a pattern to everything, a rhythm. Grant's eyes narrowed. He had been trained to fight wars of attrition, to think strategically and act decisively. The Neroth might be playing a different game, but humanity had an advantage: they didn't know when to quit. They fought to survive, and their adaptability was their greatest weapon. "Deploy the hunter drones," he ordered. "We won't let them fade into the darkness this time." A hush fell over the crew. The hunter drones were a new addition to humanity's arsenal, specialized machines designed to seek and track down cloaked enemies. They didn't rely on sensors or conventional methods of detection. They followed a pattern, sensing the slightest anomalies in space and tracking down even the most hidden adversaries. Drones deployed. "Captain," the officer at the weapons station confirmed. For the first time in weeks, the humans had a sense of hope. The drones would help level the playing field. The Neroth had the advantage of stealth, but humanity had the will to adapt, to innovate. And Grant wasn't going to let fear cloud his judgment. As the drones dispersed into the vast emptiness, Grant steadied his breath. The game had changed. No longer would the humans simply react to the Neroth's ambushes. They were going to hunt the hunters. The first Neroth warship, once invisible to human eyes, shimmered briefly before being locked onto by a drone's targeting system. A burst of concentrated fire erupted from the drone, and in seconds, the Neroth ship was consumed in a massive explosion. "Target acquired," the tactical officer announced, a spark of hope igniting in his voice. "They're vulnerable." Grant's lips curled into a thin smile. The fight wasn't over. Not yet, but he knew one thing for sure. Humanity had no intention of being erased from the stars. Not by the Neroth, and not by anyone else. The war was far from finished. The final confrontation had arrived, and the galaxy held its breath. Captain Noah Grant stood at the helm of the Iron Fist, his eyes fixed on the vast expanse of space before him. Humanity had come so far, fighting through every obstacle the galaxy had thrown at them, but now they were up against something far worse than they had imagined. The Neroth had proven themselves as worthy adversaries, shadowy and unpredictable. But humanity had one thing they didn't, an unwavering resolve. The war had shifted in humanity's favor, but the Neroth weren't done. They had retreated into the depths of space, regrouping, preparing for one final push to wipe humanity off the map. The battle had come full circle, and now, at the center of it all, the galaxy's future would be decided in a single fateful clash. "We've come too far to turn back now," Grant said, his voice cutting through the tension in the command center. His crew stood at attention, their faces etched with determination. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for too long, but now it was time for the humans to show the universe exactly what they were capable of. Grant's fingers hovered over the controls as the final fleet of Neroth ships appeared on the horizon, their dark forms looming ominously in the distance. Their attack would be brutal, but Grant wasn't afraid. Humanity had always fought with everything it had, and they would do so now. "Prepare the fleet." "We strike at dawn," Grant ordered, his voice steady as the fleet's warships aligned, weapon systems primed and ready. This wasn't just about winning, it was about survival, about reclaiming their place in the galaxy, about showing that humanity was no longer the underdog. The time for fear had passed. The galaxy's eyes were now on Earth, watching as the last warships of the Neroth closed in. The Neroth had proven themselves to be formidable opponents, swift, merciless, and able to disappear at will. But humanity had learned from every battle, adapting with each new challenge. They were ready for this final confrontation, and this time, the Neroth would not escape unscathed. The Iron Fist surged forward, its engines blazing as it tore through the silence of space. Behind it, a fleet of humanity's finest ships followed, ready to do whatever it took to end the war. The humans had fought for every inch of the galaxy, but now they were about to take the one thing that had been denied to them for so long, their rightful place as the galaxy's true rulers. As the two fleets drew closer, Grant's mind raced. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. One wrong move, one missed opportunity, and it would all be over. But he didn't falter. This was humanity's fight, and they would win. The first shots were fired, the brilliant streaks of energy lighting up the blackness of space as both sides exchanged fire. Humanity's ships dodged and countered, their speed and precision overwhelming the Neroth's attempts to retaliate. It was a dance of destruction, with the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance. Grant stood tall, watching the chaos unfold. He knew the Neroth were powerful, but humanity had something they didn't heart. The Neroth fought to win, to preserve their power. But humanity fought for survival, for the chance to be something greater than anyone ever thought possible. As the battle raged on, the Neroth ships began to falter. They were fast, but they weren't invincible. And as humanity's warships picked off their opponents, piece by piece, the Neroth began to retreat. The remaining ships scattered, desperately trying to escape the unrelenting advance of humanity's might. But Captain Grant wasn't ready to stop. He could see the Neroth's retreat as nothing more than a temporary setback. This battle was only the beginning of a new chapter in the galaxy's history. Humanity wasn't just going to win, they were going to reshape the stars themselves. Iron Fist gave chase, its weapons firing relentlessly, pursuing the retreating Neroth ships with a fury that could not be matched. Each blast that hit its target echoed the certainty of humanity's dominance. The Neroth had fought to erase humanity, but in the end, it was they who would be erased from the galaxy's memory. As the last Neroth ship vanished into the void, a silence fell over the battlefield. The stars seemed to hold their breath, as if in awe of what had just transpired. Humanity had not only survived, they had triumphed. The war was over, and humanity had emerged victorious. The Iron Fist came to a slow halt as its crew cheered. The galaxy had witnessed something unprecedented.